where football goes to be reborn. Where football goes to be reimagined. Where one goes to find more of what they need. A place with endless possibilities and hidden gems. A place where only one's limitations determine how much is explored. A place that gives you all the football you can handle and more. This is the XFL Show's Patreon, guiding you to February 2020.
Hey football freaks, it's Alan. Just wanted to take the time here to let you know that this week's show is brought to you by Pretty Easy Podcasts. If you're thinking of doing a podcast, there is a way for you to do a show without having to become an audio editing master, a production whiz kid. You can just go to prettyeasypodcast.com and get your own personal producer at a very, very low cost. That'll be someone who can guide you, assist you, help you out with whatever you need to get your podcast off the ground. If you have an idea or a topic you want to talk about on a weekly basis, a daily basis, it doesn't matter. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com. Get started today. Take some of the hassle of starting a podcast off your shoulders and let the audio professionals at Pretty Easy Podcasts help you out. Pretty Easy Podcasts is where podcasters go to get their shows recorded and posted with a complete podcast studio at their disposal. Record from home or your office or anywhere, really. Pretty Easy Podcasts caters to your schedule and gives you a producer for your show at your beck and call. Go to prettyeasypodcasts.com, sign up today, be heard, have some fun podcasting, and don't let a lack of technical knowledge hold you back. Go to prettyeasypodcasts.com today.
This is the future. This is not the past.
The new XFL will kick off in 2020.
If you smell what the XFL is cooking.
It's still football, but it's professional football reimagined.
This is our moment, our story to tell. This is history begun.
This is the XFL!
Welcome, football fans. This is October 22nd, 2019. This is the road to 2020, and this is the XFL Show. I'm Alan.
And I'm Bryant.
And today is a special day. It's XFL schedule release day, and this is a special live YouTube episode where we are going to instantly react to all the games that were released by the league today and break them down. It is one of Bryant's most anticipated days. He's been talking about the schedule incessantly to us on and off the air. He made a mock schedule. I'm hyped for today, but Bryant, you're on another level, dog.
Oh, this is Christmas cometh early to me. It's a great day. I love schedules for whatever reason it may be, but I'm ready to break this down. You're right. I did a mock schedule not too long ago. We're not going to talk about how exactly I did on that one.
I'll ask you how you did a little bit. We're going to compare and contrast.
But it's a great day because now we're laying the land. We're already making travel plans. Alan, you and I were talking before we came live here on YouTube. I already got people talking on the YouTube here
of the YouTube chat.
Leon, chill. Make sure you put your comments in there, questions you guys have for us, anything that stands out to you, that'd be great. But regardless, we're already making travel plans. Alan, you and I talked off the air about how we're going to be heading to New York probably. If you guys want to go to St. Louis, you can go. I don't know if I'd actually step foot in there. That's more because of what I've said on this show. Yeah, but yes, it is a great day for me because I love this. We're getting, the runway is like, I can see the runway, Alan. It's getting there to 2020.
Well, now the rosters are there and now the games are set. This is if it wasn't real last week with the draft for you, I don't know how it wasn't. It absolutely is now. We've got games to circle on the calendar. Yeah, Brian, I don't know what. So LA and St. Louis, that's not going down to what week number? I'm looking at it, trying to keep up. Week number 7. So I guess you won't be there. I'm going to try to make that one, but you're saying you're afraid now. I think the people of St. Louis, see, even the things you say about them, they're so nice and they're such good people. I think they would not harm you. They maybe would spit in your barbecue, but that's not the worst thing.
I was going to say I'd have to bring my own food or something like that down in St. Louis, but maybe I'll go. Who knows? If we all make a plan, why not? It'll be a good time to have. XFL football in general is just going to be a great time to be had in all these cities. I can't wait to break this down, Alan. Right now, I think we're gonna break it down by week. Maybe talk about some games that we're really interested. I really want to talk about the thought process behind the leagues trying to accommodate. Obviously, we summed it up last time as into one word called politics. And basically, there's a lot of things that the league had to worry about, right? What networks want, what stadium availability was, things like that. When I made my mock schedule, I had to worry about none of those things. So now that the league has this schedule out, I think we're going to talk a little bit about how they ended up, mapping this out and hopefully in a way to maximize eyeballs in the stadium and on television.
All right, so if you want to follow along with us, we've got the XFL schedule scrolling through here on our YouTube channel. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, grab yourself a schedule. It's on XFL.com. They released it to the public, and we're going to go through this thing week by week. And let's start with week number 1. And we will start off XFL 2020, the first game with Seattle Dragons on the road at Audi Field against the DC Defenders on ABC. That's a 2 p.m. Eastern kickoff. And then that'll be followed that Saturday, February 8th, by the LA Wildcats and the Houston Roughnecks on Fox on a 5 p.m. kickoff. And the Sunday games, February 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern on Fox. It'll be the New York Guardians hosting the Tampa Bay Vipers, followed by at 5 p.m. on ESPN, the St. Louis Battlehawks on the road against Bob Stoops and his Dallas Renegades. And that is week number 1, Bryant. And for me, obviously, as a LA Wildcats hype machine that we've become, you and I mean, we're hyped for that game, but very, very interested to see that first game with Pep Hamilton against Jim Zorn. Jim Zorn in the place he used to coach, the city he used to coach in the NFL for, in DC. That is going to be fascinating to watch.
Some recognizable names coming into Audi Field in DC to start the season. I like this. This is the first time, really, if you think about it, that we're going to see this where the games are not at the same time, right? With the AAF, both games kicked off at prime time on Saturday. The original XFL, the same thing. But now you're going to have 2 separate. So are they going to make a big spectacle of this kickoff, Alan? Do you think it's going to be this huge hoopla, or is it just straight football? I mean, what are they going to do? What are they going to be? Are there going to be fireworks? Are there going to be a huge dragon head? Some defenders out there with some shields? What's going to happen when this league kicks off at 2 p.m. Eastern in DC? Who knows? I'm really looking at the New York game. They're playing at home. People called it out that said that there would be a quote-unquote blizzard. How are you going to play football in a blizzard?
DC
the
too.
Expo doesn't care.
Yeah.
They're all going to be playing these cold weather games. The day is probably going to help them a little bit with the temperatures, but still, they're going to take the risk. They're going to New York. I think that's going to look great. I think the one thing I did have was Tampa on the road this week, just because, again, my skeptics, for whatever reason in my head, are saying that Tampa might struggle a little bit. So to have more home games towards the beginning might have helped. But regardless, I think it's going to be a pretty good week.
Yeah, I'm hyped that New York's at home. I said that's what I wanted to see week 1. I think when we did our mock schedules, I had them as the very first game. They're the first game on Sunday. So I'm going to take some points there. And DC, also cold weather, is the opener. And I don't think that's something you need to really worry about. Football is football that can be played in any weather. It's a sport that can be played wherever. It doesn't matter. Tundra, in a dome. I mean, either way, I think we're going to see good, crisp football because these teams are going to be ready. There's enough time to get ready for all this. The rules, obviously, are going to play a factor. When the rule book does come out, another exciting day we're looking forward to.
Good, crisp football.
And I have no problem with that. Also, very shocked, we have to mention that the Dallas Renegades are what? Home in week 1. There was some worry that they would not have a home game in week 1 with the renovations to the ballpark there in Arlington, but all's good, and they will be home the last game Sunday night on ESPN against St. Louis.
I questioned it a little bit. I didn't know if it was going to be ready, but the league confirmed that there's no worries. The stadium will be ready. So hopefully, there's no interruption there. I find it fascinating as we move into week 2, Alan. Here, I'm going to move it a little bit forward. Still no home game for St. Louis in week 2.
Yes, let's break it down. Week number 2 for the XFL coming out, and we are going to see DC at home again in the first game against New York on ABC. The Fox game on that Saturday, February 15th, will be Tampa Bay at Seattle. On Sunday at 3 p.m. on ABC, LA will host Dallas. And then the Sunday night game, 6 p.m. Eastern on FS1, Houston will host the St. Louis Battlehawks. Battlehawks on the road on the Sunday night game, 2 weeks in a row, Bryant. And you get some teams are going to have to wait for those home openers. Some teams in week 2 will get those home openers. They staggered it a little bit, but the game that stands out most to me for week number 2 are the divisional games, the East versus East and West versus West games, when we get LA and Dallas on Sunday, and of course that opening game that weekend, New York and DC. Basically, games that could end up being rivalry games in week number 2.
Yeah, huge rivalry games. You're going to start hot. I like that the LA Wildcats are going to be hosting a game in the midday on Sunday. It's going to be great weather here in LA. It's going to look great down there in Carson, California. Huge games to be had, right? Division matchups we're looking at here between Houston hosting another. I'm sorry, DC hosting another first game of the week. Very interesting. I did notice, Alan, when we start going through some of these stats, that Houston at home is not hosting any PM games at home. So that I wonder what kind of factored into that and what went into that. But regardless, no game at home for St. Louis at this point, and I think that's the only one. Everybody else should have had a home game by then.
So you said Houston has no home games at night?
Correct.
Well, they do. 6 p.m. on week 2. Houston Roughnecks, FS1, against St. Louis. Caught you on your stats there, stat guy.
What game am I looking at? Not Houston. I said DC.
Oh, DC has no night games at home. Okay, that actually looks correct. Does 4 p.m. count as a night game? Because they do have one I'm seeing later on in the season.
I put the first game as day and the second game as the evening. So let's say
okay, no. You're talking about just the second game. They are not game number 2
first
ever
game,
at
second
home.
game.
Yeah, maybe do they have a Wrigley Field situation there at Audi Field where they don't play at night, or like they used to have at Wrigley Field? I guess
it's too intertwined into the neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I do think week 2 is the big game has to be the 2 division games. But I mean, I'm hyped for LA and Dallas because that's also a matchup at the end of the season. That's a week 10 matchup as well.
Yeah, that's going to be on Thursday night. Can't wait to talk about that one. All right, Alan, finally, football is going to return in week 3 to St. Louis. They're going to be playing New York. That's going to be the third game of that week. We'll go through that schedule real quick. It's going to be Houston at Tampa. Also, Tampa actually does open this. That's going to be their first home game as well. And then you have Dallas at Seattle, another interdivision or conference rival.
On Fox.
And then you have New York, as I mentioned, visiting St. Louis on ESPN as the early game on Sunday, and then closing out the week, an evening game on FS1, DC at LA.
Yep, and all season long, the Saturday games are your big broadcast network games, the Fox and ABC games. I believe, Brian, every single Saturday is an ABC and Fox day, except for one somewhere in the middle of the season, right? Like week number 6, it looks like. Yeah.
Week 6, it jumps to FS2. Must be NASCAR or something.
So, yeah, you've got big national, on the big broadcast networks for the Saturday games. The Sunday games will be on cable, but also a lot of Sunday games on the broadcast TV as well. Week 3, we're crossing divisions in 2, and we're also interdivision in 2. St. Louis and New York get down, and also you have Dallas and Seattle getting down. So New York and Dallas will get into the thick of their division schedule early on in the season compared to the other teams, where LA and Houston will crisscross a little bit. LA gets to host at home against DC. Where's the furthest the Wildcats travel Bryant, because
Well,
Seattle
they
had to
have to
go
go to New
all the
York.
way. New York City. So Seattle has to go all the way across the country once. LA has to go all the way across the country once, which seems fair to me. Those were some things I was concerned with, the travel and also the timing. And Seattle did get kind of jobbed in week 1. You have to maybe say they are going to, I mean, if 11 a.m. is too early for some people, Bryant, that we've talked about,
Crack it on.
yeah, week 1, they do have to be at 11 a.m. against DC. But this week 3, fun. You've got the CFL battle in the first game with Houston and Tampa Bay with Trestman versus June Jones. And you also get Pep versus Winston Moss. Should be an interesting clash of styles on that Sunday night game on FS1.
No, it's definitely going to be a very interesting styles. I'm still breaking down rosters, Alan. So to kind of figure out matchups and what's going to be the most intriguing, high speed offenses, we're gonna have to punt on that one. Maybe talk about it on our normal show this week.
Well, I'll tell you right off out of the gate. Week 1 and 2, our favorite defense on paper, the St. Louis Battlehawks, are playing 2 offenses that we all expect to be pretty high octane in Dallas and Houston. In back-to-back weeks on the road for that defense. So they will be tested right away. St. Louis.
In Texas. Do you think they're going to travel home for that week, or are they going to stay in Texas?
Just stay for the 2 weeks. I mean, yeah, they got a full week in Texas too, back-to-back. Consider, you got to look at some of the travel dates. I see at the end here, LA's got a real short week and traveling at the end of the year. But let's go into week number 4 now. And I want to get to some of your stats, too, in a minute, Brian. But week 4 on ABC, the first game, that's Saturday, February 29th, L.A. at New York against the Guardians. We're going to try to make that one big time. That's going to be a lot of fun. Fox will have the 5 p.m. Seattle and St. Louis game. Sunday, March 1st, 4 p.m. on FS1. It's finally time for the 2 teams in Texas to get down in week 4 when Houston travels to Dallas. And then 7 p.m., the late game on ESPN2, Tampa Bay Vipers, DC Defenders. Week 4, I'm circling it and calling it, Bryant, my favorite week on paper, my most anticipated week of the season.
That's very interesting. I mean, yeah, we're going to try our best to get down or up, I guess, to New York for that LA game. But you're right. The Houston versus Dallas game, the Texas battle, we're going to have to figure out a name for that rivalry at some point. But yes, that's the game that everybody's been circling around their schedules now. I'm
Renegades
sure
and Roughnecks, man. Sunday, March 1st. Mark your calendars. It's going to be
week
awesome
4 to have this game. Wait until week 4 to have this game. I mentioned it when I did my mock schedule. That game is big enough that you don't need to have it early. Remember, ratings are going to start dropping as the season goes along. You're going to need bigger matchups, better matchups to actually keep those ratings up. I think that's also why St. Louis is playing in week 3 at home and not in the first 2 weeks, because that team is probably going to support an 0-2 team, at least for that first week, coming into St. Louis for their first professional game back in a number of years. Same reason why I think Houston and Dallas are not playing until week 4. You're going to have a big, huge turnout for that game. The atmosphere is going to be electric. I'm really happy that they actually pushed that game until week 4. And Alan, I don't know why, but something really intrigues me about that DC and Tampa Pep versus Mark Trestman. Something about that matchup that we get to see twice, I'm very excited about.
Yep, that's a big division game.
Like a young gun versus I don't know.
Yeah, you have one of the more tenured coaches in the league against one of the guys who's getting his first crack at being the head coach here with that game in week 4. A lot of intriguing storylines, a lot of intriguing matchups. Obviously, the 2 offenses, the high octane Hal Mummy offense for Dallas, June Jones's offense with Houston. Which quarterback they choose, we don't know. Will it be Connor Cook? Will it be Philip Walker? Either way, they got 1 billion receivers, no tight ends, and that's going to be fascinating. And I think the 2 Smash Mouth teams are going to be LA and DC, or actually 3. I think DC is going to play that style of football, but I fully expect LA and New York to be pretty physical teams, judging by how they drafted and who their head coaches are. So that's going to be a great clash. Week 4, I'm telling you, that's the week. So help me. Let's go to week number 5, Brian. After week 5, we'll get some stats from you because I know you did a lot of work with some interesting notes on these schedules. But week number 5, Saturday, March 7th at 2 p.m. on ABC, Seattle will travel in back-to-back weeks, and they will be at Houston against the Roughnecks. 5 p.m. on Fox will be New York as the Guardians take on the Dallas Renegades. And then on Sunday, March 8th, St. Louis on the road against the DC Defenders on FS1. And ESPN will have the Sunday night game, a 9 p.m. kickoff at 6 p.m. on the West Coast. That's very, very interesting for the Tampa Bay Vipers who go to the LA Wildcats. 9 p.m. kickoff in Week 5, Bryant. We've known about that one. We knew it'd be a West Coast team, and an East Coast team has to go play in that late night game. But I don't think that's going to be a cause for concern for anybody on the Tampa side. And week number 5 does have some really exciting matchups in division again with St. Louis and DC on the East, and then the big West Coast matchup to kick things off that weekend with Jim Zorn's Seattle Dragons. 2 tough road weeks for them, St. Louis, and then this game against Houston on the road on March 7th.
I love the back and forth. There's no real, straight, hey, this is a divisional week, this is a non-divisional week, back and forth. There's a lot of mixture. We're going to get to the conversation a little bit about the last 3 weeks of the season. But you're right, that is a very late game for an East Coast team. I'm surprised they put an East Coast team in that spot. Might be some advantages for LA. They're going to have to be playing some very tough fourth quarter football. Well, the Tampa Bay Vipers. St. Louis into DC, I don't know what the travel time is for, but if you were going to see some traveling fans, I think this is where you would see it, right?
Yeah, I do. I think you're going to see some travel. You're going to see, by that also we're going to have to consider some records by week 5 too, in all honesty, because that's where you're going to really have, especially in a 10-week season, that's going to be kind of pivotal moments for some teams. If they don't, you're not winning games in the first 4 weeks, that's kind of like a do or die type week for some teams, a make or break, because moving forward for the second half of that season, going to be tough to make up ground if you lose too many in those first 4 weeks. That's also the exciting part of a 10-week season. And I can't wait, because those last 3 weeks, our good friend Mike Mitchell's here on our YouTube chat, points it out. We were talking about it also before we started, Bryant. Last 3 weeks, all interdivision, all playoff implications, all 4, basically, I see those as playoff games, week 8 through week 10 that we're going to get into. But we'll break those down here coming up. Let's look at some of the statistics you have, because you broke up how each team will travel, how each team will play in terms of what time of day, what network they'll be on. You did a lot of good work here, Brian. So what are some of the more interesting things you discovered doing all these deep dives into the schedule?
Well, I mentioned before, Alan, DC plays no second or evening games at home. They really play 7-day games and only 3 night games throughout the entire season. Which means they're going to be heavily on ABC and FS1. They're really not going to throw that ESPN and Fox. So that's going to be, they have no games on Fox. The only team that doesn't have one. Going through this list, I'll just go through some of these stats here. I do find it interesting that really LA plays 6 games on a Sunday, really no Saturday games. I just wonder what goes into the thought process of making teams play on one day versus another. Again, a lot of the politics. We're playing a lot of those secondary games. We kind of expected it with LA, but they are playing 3 of those first and early games, Alan. And actually, I will say this. I think one of those actually includes the Thursday night game, so I might have to punt on that one and say it's only 2. But they do have some early kickoffs, some noon Pacific time kickoffs that I called out that would probably happen. They have to happen if you really think about it. Some of these games have to happen. The Vipers have to go to the West Coast, right? The LA has to go to the East Coast. So some of these times are going to be a little wonky here. But Alan, I'll just go through straight down here real quick. The team that plays the most on DC plays on ABC 5 times. So does Houston and New York. And then going through the rest of this list, New York plays no games on FS1, so that's interesting. Maybe not huge a get for FS1 in the New York metropolitan area. Who knows?
I don't know. What's the cable provider in New York? Is it Time Warner? Is there some sort of dispute between them and FS1? I wonder if they take it. I mean, you have to take some of those into consideration, right? I mean,
You really do.
Good thing none of these are on Spectrum Sportsnet in LA, or otherwise no one would see an LA Wildcats game. You have to consider the major cable providers in these towns, but yeah, that's interesting to look at. The team that's on the most on network television, it looks like it's the Houston. Is it the Houston Roughnecks? That looks like they're on 7 times on ABC and Fox combined. Oh no, you have the New York Guardians 5 times ABC, 3 times on Fox. And they're the standouts.
New York for sure. That makes sense. You have New York, the biggest market out there. If there are some disputes out there, Alan, remember what Jake always says. He just wants to be able to turn on the television with some rabbit ears and be able to catch a game. So that catches that part of the market right there. Alan, I will say what I kind of gather from this is that Houston has the most favorable road schedule. They play all their games early. They play no evening games really when they're on the road, which makes it for easy travel days.
Yeah, I'm wondering for the teams like Seattle. They're way up in that corner. I think we've joked about that before, talking about schedules for how the Dragons may fare. So they're, in terms of their travel, is one of the more interesting things to follow. And we already recognize that in the middle of the season they are back to back on the road in the middle of the country. We'll see how they do come the middle of the season. At the end of the season, Seattle is pretty comfortable. They get to, they travel to LA week 9 and then week 10 they're home too. So I'll be paying attention to that, paying attention to none of these games appear to be flexible, Bryant, which we see in the NFL, but I'm assuming week 10 there's probably going to be something going on with those final games on Sunday being played at different times. I don't know. Maybe they'll flip them depending on which one's the bigger game. Obviously, you have Tampa Bay and New York is on FS1 that Sunday that we're going to get into. But yeah, there's all sorts of interesting scheduling things in terms of the networks too that we'll keep talking about here. Let's get into week number 6 and get into the second half of the XFL schedule, which was released today. And again, if you're on our YouTube channel, thanks for joining us live. If you are listening to the podcast version, make sure you have a schedule handy. And make sure you follow along here. We are in week number 6 here. And also we've got the YouTube channel or chat going on. Insert name here says, does the league have the ability to flex start times for marquee matchups near the end of the season? It does say game times TBD on some of these on this end of the season portion of the schedule here. Insert name. So we'll get to it. Let's talk week number 6, Bryant, where we will see on March 14th at 2 p.m. on ABC, the Houston Roughnecks travel to the New York Guardians. 5 p.m. on FS2. This is the FS2 Saturday week. St. Louis will be at Tampa Bay. And then on Sunday, March 15th on FS1 at 4 p.m., it'll be Dallas at DC. And then 7 p.m. on ESPN, the Wildcats of LA will travel to the Seattle Dragons. And I believe, is that the first time LA and Seattle don't touch each other until week 6, Brian?
Week 6 and week 9. So anything that's happening that game is probably going to carry over for a few weeks into week 9. LA traveling to Seattle. I'm excited for that game. That's going to be a great game under the lights, probably out there in Seattle under what do they call it? The link? Is that what it's called? No, that's in
Philly.
That's in Philly, but it's close. It's close to something like that anyway.
It's like Sudden Link. I don't know. The loud place.
CenturyLink?
Man.
CenturyLink.
Yeah, maybe.
The Clink. That's what it is. It's the Clink.
Oh, the Clink. Oh. The place the place where they lost to the Baltimore Ravens is what I call it because I'm an angry Steeler fan.
Badly.
Week 6, my most hyped game. That's the LA and Seattle game. That's going to be a big game. There should be a lot of trash talk going between those teams when you consider that's kind of a rivalry in the NFL now, and should be in the XFL. Should be some good games there.
LA is going to be only 2 division games in at that point, so huge heavy side of the division games for LA towards the end of the season. I'm excited for that game. Alan, I'm really stoked for the Dallas at DC game. I think that's going to be a very interesting game, seeing what Bob Stoops can do out there against Pep Hamilton. Again, one of those young gun versus hey, I'm Bob Stoops kind of games.
Yeah, that's the veteran coach against Pep Hamilton, Winston Moss. Those are the two And of course, Jonathan Hayes, the three coaches here, were getting their crack at it at a head coaching job. And yeah, Stoops against Pep Hamilton, Cardale, Jones, who we saw on Monday Night Raw. A lot of people had an opinion on that. Brian, we'll probably talk about on the big show this week. But yeah, going up against Bob Stoops's defense, which is also pretty good on paper compared to some of the other teams in the league. I'd probably, if I was, am I allowed to grade them yet, or are you still going to yell at me? Is that a Patreon thing?
Yeah, I would still yell at you right now. It's a Patreon thing.
Well, yeah. Leon says Audi Field's going to look amazing on TV. Yeah, I watch a little MLS, and it looks pretty rad with, soccer going on in that place. And if they're a good team and if people go out, that place could be rocking for some football. And especially with Bob Stoops and his Dallas Renegades coming to town, because they're going to, play a special brand of football. Week number 6 should be interesting with that matchup. Let's go to week number 7, March 21st, where Bob Stoops and his Dallas Renegades on ABC will take on in the 2 p.m. game the Tampa Bay Vipers. 5 p.m. on Fox will be that LA at St. Louis game. That is prime time-ish, Bryant, on a Saturday night. Sunday, March 22nd, 3 p.m. ABC. The Guardians will take on the Dragons. And 6 p.m. on FS1, Sunday, March 22nd, DC at Houston. Bryant, week 7, March 21st. It's your funeral, buddy, if you go to St. Louis. But there it is. That's the you stole our football team. Now we got our own here. And we'll see how good the Battlehawks are come week 7, because you're going to know who you are amongst the XFL's elite come that week.
Yeah, you're really going to be putting your stamp on this league in terms of how good or bad you are, really. But, man, LA at St. Louis, a game that I thought would happen early is going to happen way later in the season. I'm saying that this is probably the biggest game of the season for at least St. Louis, just because of pure emotion, I would think. There's a lot of built-up frustration there, I would assume. I'm not from St. Louis. I know that there's some hostility there for LA-based football teams, so we'll see. They gotta. It's kind of like when you see people. I forget what movie it is, but he stabs a pillow out of frustration to help with it, but it just helps. You're just taking it on a pillow. I feel like that's what St. Louis is going to try to do to the LA Wildcats here.
Except that Coach Hayes held me every single down when we played back in the day with the Raiders and the Chiefs.
Yeah, the fans are going to be interesting to keep a eye on for that. But I think St. Louis is over losing the Rams. I think this is more about Moss versus Hayes, Bryant. This is going to be the best part of that week, and that's going to be the two coaches maybe going nose to nose at the 50-yard line. We'll see. Also, in week number 7, you're crossing the divisions, the East versus West, all up and down. So this is the last week for that. So I don't know if this is going to be a week where maybe you can afford a loss. I guess you could say it before they get to those last 3 crucial division games. But this is kind of that week. We'll see. I have a prediction that if in week 7 it's where you maybe have a guy who's injured, who maybe is on the fence, maybe you hold him back and save him, because that's how important weeks 8 through 10 are.
The way they stacked these last 3 weeks, you're right. Something like that, you probably are going to think twice about actually putting them on the field. We'll get into my thought process about why they stacked those 3 divisional weeks like that. But you're right. This is that last week of just kind of straight football. No, I wouldn't say no playoff indications, but to make put your stamp on the rest of this league is going to happen in week 7, right? I kind of mentioned that a couple times, but week 7 is where you're going to say, hey, I'm a good football team. If you remember back in the AAF, Orlando never had a chance to do this, right? They didn't have a chance to kind of spread their wings against the other divisions so much. This is their time. If you're a good team, just because you're good in your division, this is your week to finally prove that you're good for the entire league.
But seeing how the playoffs are set up, winning those division games, most important thing in the XFL. Let's go to week 8 where those begin basically de facto. I'm going to call playoff time. Week number 8, March 28th. Vipers at the DC Defenders, 2 p.m. on ABC. On Fox at 5 p.m., the St. Louis Battlehawks will take on the New York Guardians. And then Sunday, March 29th, 3 p.m. on ABC. That's noon at home for the LA Wildcats, and they'll host Houston Roughnecks. And then at 6 p.m. on FS1, Seattle will travel to the Dallas Renegades. You were saying to the 12 p.m. start time.
To an LA early game. I think I was called out for.
Well, you had them at 11 a.m. and some people got really upset at your mock
1
schedule.
hour. It takes an hour to get across town in LA sometimes. Give me a break. The first of 3 straight weeks of divisional matchups. Alan, I said, that I didn't like having so many divisional matchups towards the end of the season because although if you're a under 500 team, you have the possibilities of bouncing back. You also have the possibility of getting wiped off the face of the earth in these weeks and making week 10 completely irrelevant if you're not winning those football games. If you have a 5-2 team and a 2-5 team or a 3-4 team leading into week 8, I mean, you could just completely separate yourselves at week 8 and weeks 9 and 10 become somewhat irrelevant for some teams. So that's why I kind of like mixed it up a little bit because then you have the potential of a West Coast team totally taking a East Coast team's season off the rails.
I think this is interesting because weeks 1 through 7 are important, but it does these last 3 weeks being divisional games means you can be either on the cusp or even almost in the doghouse and pull yourself out those last 3 weeks. They're crucial. Divisional records are going to be so important to get to the playoffs, which are, division championship games. It's East 2 versus East 1, West 1 versus West 1. And that means weeks 8 through 10 are essentially playoff games. And I think that is going to make for some high stakes football for all 3 weeks. I think you're missing that, Brian. I don't think come week 10 you're going to have anybody dogging it because with all those divisional games, and if these teams are beating each other, unless one team's standing out from the rest, you're going to probably at the very least have a battle for home field in that final week. I think, or at least one team trying to get that second spot. Either or, I think you're set up at least to get that in week 10, which you needed to ensure. And either way, I think by having the division games finish it off the last 3 weeks, you're ensuring yourself of that. Either you're going to get the dominant team locked in their spot and the other team's fighting for the second in the playoffs, or you're going to get maybe 2 teams have it settled and they're just going to be duking it out for home field. And don't forget, those 2 teams could be playing back-to-back weeks, week 10, and then into the playoffs. It could be LA and Dallas Thursday, April 9th, and then again, Saturday, April 8th, or Sunday, April 19th.
But see, the way you're saying it is like you're saying that it's more likely that teams will be facing off for playoff positionings in week 10 than the other way around. And I say they're both likely. That's the problem, is they're both likely in the sense that you could have teams that are no longer in the race playing in week 10, and they could have been trying to play spoiler to a team on the East Coast. That's why in my mock schedule I had them as not division games in week 10. Plus, do you really want to see that repeat matchup in week in the playoffs that you just saw in week 10? I mean,
I don't, but that's why I was an advocate for just the best 4 records getting in and scrapping divisions for the playoffs. But this is how it's set up, and the way it's set up is, I think, perfect for making sure teams are alive for the last 3 weeks, and also making sure that in week 10 there's going to be some sort of stakes being played for going into the playoffs.
Mike brings up a point here on the YouTube that's saying having the final 3 weeks being all divisional games ensures that even teams at 2-5 or 3-4 are still live for a playoff spot. That's for week 8. If they lose, they're done. That's the problem. You're right. It does give you that option, but all it is an option. And if that team loses and the 2 teams that are in the playoffs win, then week 9 and week 10 become moot at some point. So it's just you got to be careful. That's all I'm saying. At this point, it's too little, too late. I'm just preaching to what do you call it when I'm crying on whatever you call the damn saying. All I'm saying is that it doesn't matter anymore, because this is what it is. All I'm saying is that potentially, yes, teams could be still in it come week 8. I get it. But
I
for
think
week 9 and
it's
10, they could also be out of it.
I think hypothetically. So let's say it's I don't know, DC and New York, week 9. Are, in week 8 they both won their games, and St. Louis and Tampa Bay are out of it. And DC and New York are the two teams in the East, and they play each other in week 9. Well, that means week 9 and week 10, maybe, depending on how close they are in record, are at least going to be for home field in the playoffs. And that's exciting, and that's fun. And also, so I think even if you're giving teams a shot, week 8 means to have a team be out of it by week 8 would be a bummer. That's 3 whole weeks left in the regular season. And also, if they do get knocked out in week 8, that means at the end of it, you've got teams fighting each other for home field and jockeying for position, and you've got, gamesmanship. Maybe teams sit people out in week 10. I don't know how. We'll see how far ahead some teams are, but I have a feeling we're going to have a measure of parity, hopefully, based on how the league set up the draft. That'll tell us a lot about how the draft was come week 10, and we'll see how close all these teams are in the standings. We need to get back into it. Where'd we leave off at, Brian? I think week 8, so let's go to week 9. And Thursday, April 2nd, it is Dallas at Houston for the second time. The rematch, that'll be 8 p.m. on a Thursday. It's the first Thursday game. Saturday, April 4th, 2 p.m., it'll be DC at New York. And then 2 division games on Sunday, April 5th at noon. You have the Battlehawks hosting the Tampa Bay Vipers on ESPN. And then FS1 will have LA and Seattle at 6 p.m. on Sunday. That is going to be a crucial week. And if anything, Brian, in week number 9, we get Dallas and Houston too. Even if one of them stinks, there's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of hatred on the field. At least we all hope so.
We're banking on that playoffs will be on the line throughout these last.
Let's just hope these Thursday XFL games are nothing like NFL Thursday games.
I won't go into that realm, but you're right. Dallas at Houston is going to be great on Fox to kick that week off. I'm wondering what goes behind the decision of having a Thursday night game. Whose decision was that? Whose request was that? Was that the leagues? Was that the networks? Really to have that Thursday night filled with some football. Alan, I'm really looking forward to that DC at New York game that week. I feel like that one's going to have a lot on the line. It's going to look great in MetLife Stadium. Also, Seattle at LA. We just talked about it. They're going to face off for the first time in week 6, and then bounce back and face each other again here in week 9. Should be a great matchup.
Yep, and both times they face each other, it's the Sunday night game. Once on ESPN this week. In week 9, it'll be on FS1 with LA hosting. And week number 9 is gonna, I'm sure tell a lot, but hopefully not decide it all. Hopefully it all gets decided ideally in week 10 with some exciting last week matchups before the playoffs. Thursday, April 9, another Thursday game on Fox. Again, LA will be on the road against Dallas to close up the season. Saturday, April 11th on ABC. Houston wraps up at Seattle at 2 p.m. And then the Eastern games on Sunday, April 12th. Those are the to-be-determined games for the times. Those maybe will be flexed. Who knows what the league will do depending on what teams are good, what's on the line. But on April 12th, 3 p.m., DC scheduled to be on ABC at St. Louis. And FS1 will have the night game 6 p.m. with New York at Tampa Bay. And it's all on the line, hopefully, in week 10 for all those games. Interesting, though, that the East plays all together on Sunday, where you spread it out between teams in the West. I like a final week of the season where everybody's playing at the same time, but you can't do that for this league because you need to get everybody watching every single game.
You really do. Very interesting that the playoffs start with the East teams facing off the first on Saturday. When they play on Sunday, and the West teams don't play until Sunday when they finish their week 10 first.
Yep.
I will say
also gotta also, if LA is one of those playoff teams, they only have a short break. They play Sunday, April 5th, and then turn it around again on April 9th. Very short week.
That's
for the
where
Wildcats.
I was headed next. Very short week, an evening game on Sunday, then having to travel to Dallas on 3 days rest. Very interesting scheduling that they gave Dallas both those Thursday games. I really thought that they would not have the same team play in both those games. At least LA is playing at home, just to make travel a little bit easier. But I mean, if that game has a lot on the line, LA can turn to the fact that Dallas has a whole week off while LA had to travel and only had 3 days off.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it. It's biased. They're trying to make the Dallas Renegades America's team, just like Vince is trying to do on this show, and I'm not gonna let him. Coach Moss is gonna rip that mantle, rip that trophy right off the mantle of Bob Stoops, and America's team will be the LA Wildcats, Bryant, in Week 10. I'm calling it right now. But you're right, very interesting. Dallas gets both Thursday games. They get a lot of spotlight, and while New York's on network TV the most, Dallas is in those two major spotlighted games in the middle of the week, which should give a lot of attention to their team. Hopefully they're good for the league then, because you don't want a bad team playing 2 weeks in a row on a Thursday. And then that brings us to the playoffs, which are division championship games on April 18th, Saturday. Like you said, Brian, East 2 versus East 1. And then the Sunday, April 19th at 3 p.m. Both games are at 3 p.m. Fox Saturday, ESPN on Sunday. The best team in the West will host the second best record in the West. And we will set up our XFL championship game to be played on Sunday, April 26th, 3 p.m. on ESPN. This is awesome. We could circle our calendars. We went through the whole schedule, Bryant. I'm absolutely hyped for the entire season. Week 4 in particular. You have any closing thoughts?
I haven't really had the huge chance to kind of go through this and break it all down, but I am very intrigued on some of the decisions they made. Like I said, St. Louis not playing a home game until Week 3 makes perfect sense in my mind, just because you're going to have a packed stadium there. So that's a very good scheduling by the league. I'm going to have to go through some more of these, but come on, man. LA, why? What did LA do to anybody except win championships? Why do we got to get hosed? I don't understand.
Well, week 1 is the week we all got to be talking about right now, though, moving forward, because that is kickoff week, and that's the week it all gets started. And it all gets started with Seattle and DC. I can't wait to see. I mean, maybe I'll try it. I don't know if I have to. It might take me some time, but I'd love to see someone come up with a strength of schedule just based on rosters, which you can do now because we do have rosters. I might do that, but just strength of schedule based on a few players and the coach. I think I might be able to pull that off. Maybe I'll do that. Can I do that on a normal show, or does that have to be on the Patreon?
I'll put a pin in it. I'll have to get back to you. We'll see. Always about content, guys. Everyone, thank you for listening here on YouTube. Remember, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Our normal show drops every Sunday, Football Sunday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe on your favorite podcast gimmick. Alan, I will say this: the Patreon is going to be lit. We have a lot of stuff to go up there. A lot of roster breakdowns, roster ranking, quarterback rankings. Probably some more schedule stuff there. So go check that out. Patreon.com/This Is the XFL Show. A lot of free stuff up there too, as well. And also a lot of bonus shows, Alan, that we've done that maybe were a little obscure at the very beginning, but are kind of making sense now.
Yeah, they are, and they're clear, and they're also now maybe some shows we got to go back to and re-examine, discuss some more stuff on the Patreon, and of course the big show. We're gonna have all sorts of topics to talk about. It's gonna be a fun one this week. Jake and Vince hopefully will get into the fold, and they can react to the schedule some, and we'll hear from everybody at XFL Show. And bring that back to the podcast and talk about what you're saying about this schedule. There's a lot to dive into this thing. We just scratch the surface here on this live stream, and on we're gonna put this out onto the feed for everybody for free. But get ready, because February 8th, now we know the Seattle Dragons and the DC Defenders will be the first teams playing XFL football. I'm still on the fence on who's playing quarterback for Seattle, but I can't wait to see Cardell Jones take the field in that game. And then we're on and popping from there. For Bryant, I'm Alan. Thank you again for joining us live on YouTube and subscribing to the podcast. We'll be back each and every football Sunday, and that's this coming Sunday, to break down this schedule some more, because this is the XFL Show. Remember, they're listening.